In the summer of 2019, glaciologists studying ice recession in the Jotunheimen Mountains of southern Norway discovered something that had been frozen for over 8,000 years. A crevasse, deep, narrow, carved into ancient glacial ice that predated modern civilization. And at the bottom, 17 meters down, preserved in blue ice, a man. Not lying down, not collapsed, not fallen, standing, vertical, upright, arms at his sides, head tilted back, eyes still partially intact due to the extreme cold, facing north, locked in that direction with anatomical precision. In his right hand, gripped so tightly that the ice had to be melted to remove it, was a wooden spear. Not a hunting weapon. Too ornate, too carefully carved. The shaft was decorated with geometric patterns, spirals, lines, dots, symbols carved with deliberate intent. Dr. Ingrid Haugen, the lead archaeologist brought in to assess the find, described it as one of the most disturbing things she'd ever seen. Because the ice surrounding the body showed no signs of fall trauma, no fractures, no compression injuries, no evidence that he had slipped or been caught in a collapse. He had been placed there, deliberately, carefully, positioned, and the ice analysis suggested something impossible. He may have been alive when it happened. This is the story of a hunter who was buried standing up, facing north, holding a spear, and frozen in place for 8,000 years. 8,000 years ago, the Jotunheimen region of Norway was emerging from the final stages of the last ice age. Glaciers still covered the high peaks, but valleys were opening. Forests were returning, rivers carved through newly exposed rock. This was the Mesolithic period, the Middle Stone Age, the time between the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of agriculture. People in Scandinavia lived as hunter-gatherers, following seasonal patterns of game and fish. They hunted reindeer, elk, and wild boar. They fished salmon and trout in the rivers. They gathered berries, roots, and hazelnuts. They were highly mobile, small family groups moving through territories they knew intimately. They built temporary shelters from wood and hide. They made sophisticated tools from stone, bone, and antler. They understood the landscape, its rhythms, its dangers, its resources, and they understood ice. Glaciers were part of the world, permanent, dangerous, places where the ground could open without warning, where crevasses hid beneath fresh snow, where the cold could kill in minutes. No one went into the deep ice by choice, not to live, not to hunt, not to travel, but they did go there for one reason: ritual. Archaeological evidence from across Scandinavia shows that Mesolithic people used glaciers and high mountains as sacred spaces. Offerings were left in ice caves. Tools were deposited in crevasses. Animals were sacrificed on exposed peaks. The ice was a threshold, a boundary between the living world and something else. And in that threshold, someone placed a man, standing, facing north, holding a spear, and left him there to freeze. Dr. Haugen's team spent 2 years carefully extracting and analyzing the body. The preservation was extraordinary. Among the best Ice Age or Mesolithic human remains ever recovered: skin, muscle tissue, internal organs. Even the eyes, though clouded, retained structural integrity. The man was approximately 35 to 40 years old at death, tall, over 180 centimeters, robust build. His bones showed no signs of disease or malnutrition. His teeth were worn but healthy. Isotope analysis of his hair revealed a diet rich in fish and game, consistent with coastal or riverine populations. He had been strong, healthy, in the prime of life. But the positioning was what made Dr. Haugen's team pause. The body was perfectly vertical, feet at the bottom of the crevasse, standing on a narrow ledge of compacted ice, knees slightly bent, as if bracing, arms straight at his sides, head tilted back at a 40-degree angle, an unnatural position that required deliberate arrangement. And his eyes were open, frozen open, staring north, Forensic analysis showed no fractures to the cervical vertebrae, meaning his head hadn't been forced into that position by trauma. It had been placed there, held there, until the cold set in and locked it permanently. The clothing was minimal, a simple hide garment around his waist. No coat, no leggings, no footwear. Inadequate for the cold, especially at this altitude, especially in a crevasse where temperatures would have been well below freezing even in summer. And then there was the spear. The weapon was unlike any hunting implement found in Mesolithic Norway. The shaft was longer, nearly 2 meters, made from birch wood, carefully smoothed and decorated with carved patterns. The spearhead was flint, but the workmanship was ceremonial rather than functional. The edges were sharp, but the hafting was delicate, designed more for display than combat. And carved into the shaft, just below the midpoint, was a symbol that appeared in only a handful of Scandinavian rock art sites. A circle with a vertical line through it. Researchers believe it represents the axis mundi, the cosmic axis, the center of the world, the connection between earth and sky, a symbol of transition, of crossing between realms. In 2021, Dr. Haugen brought in Dr. Christian Nordahl, a glaciologist specializing in ice formation dynamics. His task was to determine how the man ended up in the crevasse and whether the ice provided any clues about the circumstances of his death. What Nordahl found was extraordinary and deeply unsettling. Ice core analysis from the layers surrounding the body revealed something unexpected. The ice immediately encasing the man, within 5 centimeters of his skin, showed microscopic air bubbles consistent with rapid freezing of liquid water. Not snow, not compacted ice. Liquid water, meaning the crevasse had contained water, either from glacial melt or an underground spring, when the man was placed inside. And that water had frozen quickly, fast enough to preserve tissue, fast enough to lock him in position before decomposition began. But here's what made it impossible to ignore. The body showed no signs of drowning. The lungs contained air, not water. The airways were clear. He had been breathing when the water froze around him. Nordahl's reconstruction suggested a timeline that was difficult to accept, but supported by the physical evidence. The man had been placed in the crevasse, possibly lowered by ropes. Water, either naturally present or poured in, filled the space around him. And then, as temperatures dropped, the water froze, slowly at first, then faster as the cold intensified. He would have felt it, the water turning to slush, then ice, creeping up his legs, his torso, his arms. And through it all, he remained standing, head tilted back, eyes open, facing north. Nordahl's report included this line: "The positioning and ice formation suggest the individual was alive during the initial stages of freezing. Duration of consciousness unknown, but physiological evidence indicates he did not struggle." Dr. Haugen later described the implications in an interview. Either he was unable to move, drugged, bound in some way we can't detect, or he chose not to. And I'm not sure which is more disturbing. Since the discovery, researchers have proposed multiple theories to explain why a healthy Mesolithic hunter would be placed in a glacial crevasse and left to freeze. None provide complete answers. Theory 1. Sacrificial offering to glacial spirits. Some anthropologists believe the man was a human sacrifice, an offering to spirits believed to inhabit the ice and mountains. In circumpolar cultures, glaciers were often seen as living entities, requiring appeasement through gifts or sacrifice. The ritual spear, the symbolic positioning facing north, and the ceremonial nature of the burial all support this theory. What it explains: the deliberate placement, the lack of struggle, the ritual objects and symbols. What it doesn't explain: why a healthy, valuable member of the community would be chosen. Why he remained standing rather than being laid in a more conventional burial position. And why this specific crevasse was selected. Theory 2. Voluntary death ritual. Dr. Hogan has proposed that the man may have entered the crevasse voluntarily as part of a vision quest or spiritual transformation ritual. In many shamanic traditions, individuals undergo extreme ordeals, fasting, exposure, sensory deprivation, to achieve altered states of consciousness or spiritual insight. The positioning facing north could represent orientation toward the realm of ancestors or spirits. The spear could be a symbolic guide or protective talisman. What it explains? The lack of restraints, the calm positioning, the ritual elements. What it doesn't explain: why he would remain standing as water froze around him, why his community would allow this, and why, if this was spiritual transformation, his body was left rather than retrieved. Theory 3. Punishment or exile execution. A darker theory suggests the man was being punished. Mesolithic societies likely had codes of behavior and consequences for violations. Placement in a glacial crevasse, alive, facing a specific direction, holding a spear that marked his status or crime, could represent ritualized execution. The minimal clothing and exposure to elements support this theory, as does the isolated location. What it explains: the apparent restraint, the deliberate cruelty of slow freezing, the permanent removal from the community. What it doesn't explain: why such elaborate ritual would accompany a punishment, why a decorated spear would be provided, and why the body shows no signs of violence or binding. Theory 4. Shamanic journey. One-way passage. The most speculative theory is that the man was a shaman or spiritual leader undertaking a final journey into the spirit world. The crevasse represents a literal passage. A doorway facing north aligns with many circumpolar beliefs about the direction souls travel after death. The standing position could represent readiness, willingness, the spear as both guide and proof of his role. What it explains: the voluntary nature, the symbolic elements, the community investment in proper positioning and ritual objects. What it doesn't explain: why he would be frozen alive, why this method specifically, and why, in cultures that honor shamans, his body was left in ice rather than given more conventional burial. The mystery remains, and the hunter, preserved now in a climate-controlled facility in Oslo, still stands, still faces north, still holds his spear. Here's what we know for certain. 8,000 years ago, a man in his late 30s walked, or was taken, to a glacial crevasse high in the Jotunheimen Mountains. He was healthy, strong, valued enough to be given a ceremonial spear carved with symbols we still don't fully understand. He was placed in the crevasse, standing, facing north, eyes open, head tilted back. Water, cold, glacial water, filled the space around him, and as it froze, he remained still. No struggle, no attempt to climb out, no evidence of panic. Just a man, standing in ice, holding a spear, facing north, for 8,000 years. We don't know if he chose this. We don't know if he was honored or condemned. We don't know if this was sacrifice, punishment, or transcendence. What we do know is that someone, or many people, believed this mattered enough to carry it out with precision, with ritual, with care. They positioned him exactly. They gave him a spear marked with sacred symbols. They oriented him toward the north, and they left him there, to freeze, to wait, to stand forever in the ice. The crevasse has been sealed now, the site protected, but the man remains in Oslo, preserved behind glass, still standing, still facing north, still holding a spear we may never fully understand, and still waiting for an explanation that may never come. If this story unsettled you, you're not alone. The standing burial in Jotunheimen remains one of the most enigmatic and disturbing discoveries in Scandinavian archaeology. If you want to explore more mysteries like this, rituals frozen in time, bodies that tell stories we can't quite read, evidence of beliefs we can barely imagine, subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with your theory. What do you think happened to that hunter? And if this story stayed with you, hit the like button. Every stone remembers a story. This one remembers a man who stood in ice and never fell. See you in the next mystery.